Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and definitely some waves in their callings. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Adam Torres, a visionary entrepreneur and media powerhouse who's on a mission to amplify voices and inspire generations. As the founder of Mission Matters, Adam has conducted over 6,000 interviews, building a media empire that boasts more than 100,000 pieces of content across books, shows, and podcasts. That's a lot, but wait, there's more. From managing $500 million in assets to revolutionizing the media landscape, Adam's journey is a testament to the power of storytelling and personal branding. Today, we'll explore the keys to building an authentic personal brand, leveraging media to reach the masses, and why businesses should consider starting a podcast or publishing a book. Get ready for an engaging conversation that will change the way you think about your story and its potential impact on those around you. Now, before we roll that intro, please hit the share button, send this over to some friends and through your networks. I know many are going to enjoy this conversation. There's two other things you can do. You could give 5am podcast a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player. And if you want to amp up your support a bit more, head over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast, buy a few cups of coffee. And a special thanks, while we're on the subject, for the cups we received this week. Thank you for your support of the mission of 5am podcast. Now, let's roll that intro. Adam Torres, a special welcome to you, my friend, to the 5am podcast.
Hey, Michael, man, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. We got a lot to cover today, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about Southern California before we started, so my brain is on the beach right now and Santa Monica. When I would have Adam, you will not sleep any better knowing this, but there was a place that my wife and I would stay near Santa Monica, or in Santa Monica rather, and there was this great yellow restaurant. Neither one of us could remember the names, but Susan loved to go and sit at that restaurant if I was off at a meeting or something like that. It was just an idyllic place to be. So now that I've firmly derailed our conversation,
And now you have me thinking about Santa Monica and this, and hey, I'm easy. I like Perry's. I'll go to Perry's, I feel like Perry's is the cheat code because I don't have to bring anything for the beach. I get to put my feet in the sand. I'm fine. Whatever.
Oh, man. And the lemonade stands.
Yeah, I'll take
ladies
that.
and gentlemen, there's just so many great places over there. But Adam, you've transitioned from managing $500,000 in assets to conducting over 6,000 interviews. We got some numbers today. There's no math, ladies and gentlemen, at all, I promise. But what was the pivotal moment that inspired this dramatic career shift?
You know, Michael, it was one of those things where we were talking about God also when we were warming up here, and we talked about signs, and you talked about a sign that you received.
That's
really
right.
I had these two. I'm not one of those people that maybe I'm not the Elon Musk that can have like all these businesses that are working well. I had two different things that I was doing. One was I had my RIA and I was managing money, and then the second one that I had was this media company. And, you know, both of them were doing what they're doing, and this media side of things it just kind of was grabbing me. It was kind of pulling me aside, and it was taking more and more of my attention. And I had to think, you know, for the clients that I had, I'm the type of person, I'm kind of all in. One trick. That's all I got, man. That's all I got. That's why I've done over 6,000 interviews, because I got one trick. What do I do? I interview people. That's fine. Not too hard to figure it out.
Exactly.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of having this talk with God, and I'm telling him, you know, give me a sign, and I this is the exact thing that I'm thinking. I'm saying, you don't have to like part the Red Sea or anything for me. And I say this out loud because I just moved into this new place, and I'm kind of in this mode where I'm thinking about like, I need some help here, like I need some guidance. And so I go to sleep. I wake up the next morning, and I wake up, I put my feet down, and I'm standing in water. And I'm thinking to myself, the first thing I think of, and I think I'm dreaming still. I don't think I'm awake. I really think I'm dreaming. And the first thing I think is, I'm like, all right, God, I jokingly say I didn't ask you to part the Red Sea. Like, what's up? Like, so then
Yes.
I go, I think I'm asleep still. So I try to go back to sleep. I'm like, okay, let me just lay back down. Let me close my eyes. I open my eyes and and I'm like, this isn't working. I'm awake. Like, I'm awake. So I wake up, and so then I go and I turn on the light to see what's going on. And what's significant about this is I look down, and right below that light switch, I'd already unpacked. I unpacked all my stuff. And what's significant about this is the one thing that I didn't do before I went to bed, and I was like, I'll deal with it tomorrow, is I had all of my certificates on the floor. Like, so think about I was in finance, so I had a CFP, I had a Series 7, I had a Series 63, I had, the list goes on and on,
Yeah.
accredited asset management specialist. When and think about these just for everybody listening at home to visualize this. Think about when you go into the doctor's office and you look behind the doctor's desk, they have all their medical license and all these things. If you've never been to a financial advisor, we would have the equivalent of that for our certificates and for what we do. So I look down and they're all ruined, like completely trashed. They're all wet, and because of all of the water. And I'm thinking to myself, I still don't know where this water came from, and I'm still a little weirded out, to be honest. But I looked down, and that was just the message. So I took them, I threw them out, I put them in the trash can, this big old dumpster behind the house, and I took a picture of it because I knew at that moment that I mean, it wasn't any clearer for me. It was like, okay, this is a new beginning. And then circle back, because the audience is probably like, okay, we understand, Adam, this is a sign for you, but where'd the damn water come from?
Yeah.
It was a water heater that night. Of the water heater broke, so I'm not joking about the water. The
Wow.
whole bottom was flooded from a water heater and ruined everything that exact moment. So that was like my gift, my sign. And that
Yeah.
was I had, 1 foot in 2 different things that I was trying to do, but that was my sign. At that point, I decided I'll give up my licenses. I'm gonna, exit my practice, and this new thing of media, whatever that means, because I'm not claiming I knew at that moment, but this new journey that I was on would really begin then.
Yeah. It almost sounds like it was a sense of burning the boats, like there's no turning back. So what was your next step after you realized you had a very clear indicator that you were moving forward?
Well, we already had the company started, and I'd already been doing some interviews. We'd already published a book or two. And then I'd also published a book under just my name and not under the company at that point. And myself and my other business partner, his name is, so there's one other co-founder at Mission Matters, his name's Shirag Sagar. And we had a sit down, and we decided. He had another company at that point as well called Destination Luxury. It was another media company. So he actually came from the media side of things. And we just had a discussion, and we were like, hey, if we're going to do this thing, like, we got to do it. So he had some other, let's just say he wound down a bunch of his board obligations. I wound down a bunch of my board obligations and a bunch of other things that we did that were just, weren't going to be that central focus, because we knew that if this was going to be our thing, and if we were going to want to take this and make this as big as possible, we couldn't have any distractions. So we doubled up on that burning the boats, and we
Yes,
got focused.
that's good. So can you talk a little bit about the patience that was required as you were going from terminating kind of the series of relationships into where you really wanted to be? I'm sure you were chomping at the bit to get going.
Well, I mean, was or is required.
Yeah, still.
Still required. Well, I'll tell you, not only is it patience, but I guess this is the definition, at least the way that we've built this company, is the definition of consistency. It's the definition of execution. So if you think about it, just to put this in context for the viewers and listeners, I'll do this year between 1,500 and 2,000 interviews. So if you think about that, I'll do 40 years of content this year. And where I get that number is based off of, most shows are going to do about 50 episodes a year. So I'll do about 40 years of content this year. So when you say 6,000 interviews, when I went back, and again, I'm a finance guy, like that's how my head thinks. The way that I kind of developed the media side of the model was, I said, okay, let's look at the greatest entertainers that ever lived. Let's look at their catalog. Think about your Johnny Carsons, your David Lettermans. Think about like how many episodes they did. Think about your Oprahs. Think about all of these greats. And I came up with the number of about 30,000. Like 30 to 40,000 is about what their catalogs are. depending, right? If we're looking at episodes, there's a bunch of different ways to break it down. But let's just say my numbers came up with 30 to 40,000. So in my head, when I started on that journey, I thought about it and I said, well, I'm not even going to look at the work or even judge it until I get to at least 10,000. The whole, 10,000 hour rule. I was like, I got to be at least 10,000 before I can even think about anything else. And about actually looking at the body of work. So I'm still not at that, by the way. So I'm still a baby in the business. And for whatever I've been able to accomplish, I say I'm still a baby, because if you look at the entertainment side in general, we're talking about these people who have 20, 30, 40-year careers. We look at a Bob Hope, what has he got, an 80-year career, 70-year career, whatever it was. So if you think about like understanding what business you're in, when I accepted that I was in the entertainment business, it was actually very, very liberating, because I didn't have to have it all figured out. I didn't have to know everything. What I had to do is put in the work every day. I do interviews almost every single day. I had the clip of 40 to 50 a week, and my record for 1 week is 91 interviews. My record for a day is 28 interviews. So when I thought about putting in the work and all of those things, then it became easy. It's like I'm shooting free throws. I'm Larry Bird in the morning, waking up, shooting whatever it was, 500 free throws before he goes to school. Like that's the way I see it now.
Yeah, that's good. So was there some mentors that came along and kind of lifted you up and steered you in the right direction?
I'll say that there's mentors in business that made sure and steered. When I say steer me in the right direction, I would like more media mentors. I don't have many. Most of the stuff I've done, I've invented, because I don't come from the industry. So because I don't come from the industry, I didn't really have that access. What I did have access to in the beginning, and not now I do, but in the beginning is what I'm talking about. Some of those early ones, they were more of the people that were investors, like my buddies that were in venture capital or finance or other things like that. They were the ones that kept challenging me and saying, all right, Adam, is this just a hobby that you like doing? But this is what they'd always say, but are you making money?
Yeah.
That's the thing they'd say to me every time. I'd be like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm excited. I got this gig I'm doing. But are you making money? But are you making money? But are you making money? So that would be, and independently, I get that advice from all my different buddies in finance. And so I guess that's the good part of coming from the finance side, because it always comes back to, but are you making money?
Yeah. And it's actually a really good scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're able to see what's working and what's not. And I love the analytics that are available to people in social media. And it's a humbling experience to look and to think that you did an amazing job on that one. And then you look at the numbers and you think, well, it's not hitting, but it could be the title. It could be the description. Maybe your tags are off. Can you talk about that aspect of fine-tuning your work, fine-tuning your message?
Well, I don't in the beginning stages. So let's say you're year 1 through 5 in the podcast game. I don't really believe in it, to be honest. Like I don't, and I'll tell you why. I'll give you some of the advice that was given me. Because in a couple of different ways. So I remember I was maybe a year and a half in, and I was giving. I was kind of getting down. I'm exactly what you're thinking about right now. I'm like, did I have enough views, or is this happening, or this? And I started to want to get into this creative space, right? That I feel like is the trap that many creatives have, to where they get in their head and then they stop producing content. They start thinking about, they get in their head and they start thinking, okay, they're looking for perfection. So I had a meeting with one of my buddies at the time. He's an old school Hollywood guy. He's a writer, wrote for shows like Hill Street Blues. And I mean, he's a classic. So he's a good guy. For the people the younger kids out there, Google Hill Street Blues, you'll see it. That's before my time too, but he's an old Hollywood great. So he tells me, hey, Adam, are you going to be better in a week than you are today? I'm like, yeah. He's like, are you better like now, right today, than you were maybe a month ago? And I'm like, yeah. What about 2 months ago? Yeah. He says, are you going to be better in 5 years? Yeah. He says, well, you don't really have any point, or there's no reason why present day Adam should be judging the results of future Adam. There's no point. Like, you're going to get better. And so understanding that, I continue to read my process. I read books, read a lot of biographies, everybody in entertainment. I want to read all their biographies. Again, all the greats, the Johnny Carsons, everybody else. And one particular book that stuck out for me was the one that Howard Stern had out there. And and he's having this conversation with somebody. And the gist of it is this. He says that in the early days of him working at those, smaller market radio stations, that it was he didn't use this word, but I use it. It was a blessing, because what it allowed him to do is it allowed him to find his voice to become somebody that was worthy of a larger audience listening to. And so for me, I was like, man, these are the greatest people in history that are saying this. And you look at somebody else like I think it was Seinfeld and might have been David Letterman. They were having a discussion about the early days, and this was out of another book, I'm sure. But they were having a discussion about the early days of TV and what they did. And they said what made what they did so great is they were doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
All the stuff David Letterman was making, that was to entertain himself and the people that were on his crew and the writers and everybody else. And that's why he was so pivotal and he was so groundbreaking, because he wasn't thinking about what had been done before. So for the optimizing part, I know many people will answer that thinking about like, okay, what's my hashtag? What's this? What's that?
Yes.
But ultimately, if you're working on your craft, I come at it from the craft part, and you're in year 1 through 5. The rest is like, once you have more money, so as we've made more money, we've grown, then you hire people.
Yeah.
Like, but if you're a host out there and you're listening to this, then you just got to be a better host. It's always going to be the person behind the microphone, period.
Yeah.
Like I don't care who, if they're optimizing something, but you're not worth listening to yet.
Yeah. Totally.
Then it might not be a blessing that you get a big audience. Who knows?
Right.
It could be. By the way, I'm not saying, I mean, it goes both ways, but I'm not judging or projecting, but
Yeah, no, that's really good. Finding your voice is critical to both host and guest. I would ask you this then, in your experience, what's the most common mistake people make in trying to build their personal brand?
Not getting started. The biggest mistake people make in not building their personal brand is not getting started, because what they don't realize is not putting thought in that. If you're out there right now listening to this and you don't have any social media accounts, you're on LinkedIn, but you haven't updated it in 10 years or whatever, and you accidentally signed up, what you don't realize is that is a personal brand. It's saying that you are not in tune with today. It's saying that you don't care. It's saying that you're all right with your competition looking better than you, because your digital presence is a presence. And after COVID, I would argue it's more important than your in-person presence, because everybody's going to go online first after COVID. Pre-COVID, we could have had a lot of discussion around that, blah, blah, blah. Post-COVID, no way, no how. You're out there, you don't have an optimized LinkedIn, but yet you want to be in the workforce. I mean, and any type of it, like, it's just, why? Like, you have to. It's not even a choice. Like, after COVID, I mean, like, so You don't want to be that person that, you're up for a gig and they Google you and they don't find you, or they can't find you, or you're a ghost. Like, because that's a brand. It's called You Don't Care.
Yeah. And I totally get that. I think back to my IATSE days, and there, the business director or the steward would just go through the crew list to see who says yes to the gig. And I get that is a little bit different than what you're describing, but it isn't like that anymore, where people are just going to call the names on the list, and if you say yes, you're in, like Flynn.
Yeah.
And how has the landscape of personal branding evolved even since you started Mission Matters? And maybe are there some trends that you foresee coming up?
Yeah, I think the opportunity's gotten bigger. So I'll give you an example. So the way that we built, when we originally even built this company, it was just doing a podcast. I had no concept of what a personal brand was. I had no concept of what that even meant. I just thought, hey, I'm gonna build a podcast. We didn't really consider like the idea of me, like my face as a personal brand, because I'm a podcaster, like whatever. I'm not a celebrity, and I'm not doing an A-list. I'm not The Rock, right? Like I'm doing a huge movie, right? So I didn't really think about it at that time, but because the other co-founder here, Chirag Sagar, what did come from media, he understood that a little bit more than me. So we'd always been pretty diligent. And even if you think about our books, like on our books, we have my face is on the cover of the book. By the way, story about that quickly. My first book, I didn't want to have my face on the cover of the book. I'm like, why would I do that? That's silly. Like, that's weird. That's, whatever. But ultimately, we did make that decision. And then guess what? that worked for us. All of a sudden, I was getting booked for speaking gigs. I was getting booked for other things. And now I had all these other monetization opportunities because people knew my face. Now, I mean, we put my face everywhere, and we got business card, but this is the funny one. The viewers at home, you won't be able to see this possibly, but I'll show you, Michael. So now this is the power of personal brand. What you're looking at there, this is
awesome.
What's funny about this though is you said power personal brand.
That's right.
Arabica Coffee, Arabica1976.com. For those that are at home driving their car, you can't see what I'm holding up. I held up a bag of coffee. My face is on it. It's on a coffee bean, and it says Adam Torres X Arabica. But here's the key. This company's been around since 1976. They roast over 10 tons of coffee. This isn't some small, they have over 200 locations. So why did they come to me? Because of my personal brand. They came to me for my face. They came to me for my audience. And if I hadn't thought about personal brand, if I hadn't built that up, if you Google Adam Torres or Adam Torres podcast, go to the images, you're going to see more about me than you ever want to see in your life, myself included. I'm not saying do that, but like, I don't want to see either. But
it's out there.
Depending on where your goals are at, like that would have never, remember the coffee? I forgot what that is. The guy with the donkey on the coffee, like whatever that is. I'll be the next one of those. With zero coffee background, but I love coffee. I'm drinking a cup of it now.
Yes, you know it. So speaking of this, then many entrepreneurs, I think, could struggle with the idea of putting themselves out there. Like you were saying, I don't want my face on that billboard or something or that bus bench. But what advice do you have for overcoming that fear of actually making yourself visible and realizing that you have to build that personal brand?
Well, I'll tell them this. If you believe that if I can do it, you can do it. And I'll share a story of if I can do it, you can do it. When I first started in this business, I was so scared, terrified. And people were like, yeah, right, Adam. My first show, I didn't even use my real name. I had like a nickname because I was deathly afraid somebody would actually know that it was me doing it. I'm not joking. This is a true story. Anybody that's ever gotten a contract from us, it was Mr. Century City. that was a nickname because that I had on like the Century City Chamber of Commerce and stuff because I just loved Century City. It's a city in LA. For anybody that doesn't know, it's the little brother to Hollywood, right next door, adjacent to Beverly Hills, just for context. For those that aren't familiar with LA. So think of it as it's the little brother that makes Hollywood move. It's where all the paper pushers, I say affectionately, the lawyers, the money, that's where the money comes from. So I love Century City. And so they started calling me Mr. Century City. So my first show, it'd be like, hey, this is Mr. Century City. And I'm like, I didn't even say my name to the point that I was so scared. And let me take it a step further. Not only did I not say my name, I wouldn't do video. I did over 300, no, actually I did more than that. I did, I think 1,500 plus interviews, only audio, because I was deathly afraid to turn on a camera. If you would have turned on a camera and said something, I'd be like, what's my name? I forget my name instantly. So I wasn't built for this business. But if I have any polish now, anything else, that's through the putting myself through that Gethsemane of thousands and thousands of interviews and executing every day, week by week. For the entrepreneurs, to circle back to your question, if you're scared, you're in good company. You should be scared. If you're not scared, you probably wanted to be in the entertainment business. And if that's the case, then you don't need this advice. Like if you're scared, you're in good company. You should be scared. It's new. It's like, but on the other side of that fear could be some gold for you. If I didn't, I mean, that goal doesn't have to be money. It could be money, but it could be purpose. It could be the fact that you get to inspire millions of people. It could be that you provide a platform for other people to be able to share their stories, which is what I pride myself in, is that I get to help other people share their stories. For many people, Michael, that's the first time the first time they've ever been interviewed was on my show. And it doesn't mean that it's because they're not successful, or it doesn't mean because they're young. Like I'll dispel any of those myths or stereotypes. What it means is that even the most successful people out there maybe sometimes have imposter syndrome, and they think my story doesn't matter. Or what I'm telling you, some of these far more successful than me, wealthier than me, started more businesses, more tenure, my senior in age, will come on the show and be like, hey, Adam, this is my first time coming on. I don't know if it's going to be great. I don't know this, that. And I'm like, man, you stop talking to me about that. Don't even try it. What are you talking about?
That's right.
You've done this, and this. Look, I'm a little podcaster compared to you. What are you talking about? But
Yes.
everybody suffers. That imposter syndrome's a thing.
That's right. We need that PMA, positive mental attitude.
Come on. Was that Zig? Zig?
That was.
Come on, Zig. I love a Zig quote. Man, you made my day throwing in some Zig.
Oh, that's good. I love his books, Zig Ziglar. Man, when I first heard of him, I thought, who gave him that name? But then I started reading his stuff, and I was like, I don't care what his name is. This man is good. And then you find Og Mandino. Like, was Og just trying to get a worse name than Zig Ziglar? I don't know, but...
I don't know. I like calling him OG. I know you're not supposed to...
That's
I know his name is Og, but I'm like, OG Mendingo. Come on, man.
It. Oh, man. If you haven't, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't read the book about the carpet salesman.
Greatest salesman in the world, right?
Greatest salesman in the world by Og Mandino. That'll change your life. So we'll talk about podcasts again because we're on one and we're talking about it. What separates the good interviews from a great one? And how do you prepare to ensure that your conversations are impactful?
Yeah. So good versus great in terms of an interview, I'd say it had the stories that are told during the interview. So storytelling is the key, specifically for podcasts, because if you think about where the majority of downloads for podcasts come from, I'm not talking about for Instagram. I'm not talking about repurposing. I'm not talking about, a big YouTube channel, because I mean, even though you do have podcasts published on YouTube, it's still not the feel, and that's not where the majority of it comes from. So if we're talking about your, I think, and please somebody put in the comments and say, Adam, you're wrong, and give us some engagement and boost this reach. But I think it's something like 70%. If somebody call me out, give me the real number, but it's like 70% of downloads come from Apple, give or take, on their platform, and the rest is a big chunk after that is like Spotify and some other ones. But if we're talking about podcasts, just to qualify the answer to the question, I think that the storytelling ability and the host letting and or helping and telling the guest in advance that you got to come with stories. Like stories are what, like the numbers, things like that you'll glaze over. You're not going to think about it. You're in the gym, you're doing something else.
Totally.
Like it was my hope, for example, when I told the story about how I made my transition, I could have done that completely different. I gave you the actual story and what happened, and I tried to illustrate. I put my feet on the ground and they were in water. Like, so if that hopefully gets your attention, like you're like, wait a minute, this guy's hold on. I was doing something else, but now I got to listen to this guy because what is he talking about? His feet's in water. He's crazy. Like, this guy's insane. Second. Who is this? So I'm intentionally telling you stories. Now that's, so you may have a guest on the show. So I'm going to give you from two different sides, from the host side and then from the guest side. From the host side, if you don't tell your guest in advance, hey, this is going to be a X amount of time podcast. For a 30-minute podcast, I recommend at least 2 good stories. So, hey, I want you to bring 2 solid stories to the table. We'll tee them up for you properly. I want you to and don't invent anything. Don't make it new. Like, give me the one you told your friends 1,000,000 times.
Totally.
Because that's the one that's going to resonate. That's the one that we'd all, and this is a real quick sidebar, we'd all be so lucky if somebody listens to this podcast, and I'd be so lucky. Somebody listens to this pod, they're like, wait a minute, I heard Adam tell that story before. Like, what? I heard him tell that story. If you're remembering my stories, then you know what you're gonna call me one day. It'll be like, that's Tony Robbins, that's Oprah. Those are the Les Brown. We remember their stories because they've been telling the same stories for 30, 40 years.
Absolutely.
And it's okay. We love hearing them. Totally. I can't wait until Les gets into, I had the privilege of meeting Les recently. I can't wait until he gets into him talking about running for office and all the things he did, and his mom and his love for his mom and all those things. Love it every time. I'm give me the popcorn. Start talking about your mom, Les. I'm in. So that's where I see it. And I'm like, so that's from the host side. From the guest side, that information that I just gave you, not all hosts know that information. So they're not going to prompt you. Probably if you're listening to this, you probably have never been on a show that's ever prompted you or told you that. So some people are natural storytellers, and I'll address that briefly. If you're a natural storyteller, then you need to know how long the episode is, because you need to be able to tell that story for a 2 to 3 minute TV segment, for a a 30-minute or 20-minute podcast, or if you have a long podcast where you're going to be on for 2 hours, you need to have a 15-minute version of that story. Maybe. So you need to be able to tweak and use that same story and or catalog of stories in a professional manner so that you're not telling it in a way that is not good for the flow of the show. So you need to be more cognizant and aware. That's advanced for the good storytellers out there. If you're a beginner and you're just getting going, just make sure you come with 2 to 3 stories. Like make sure you come to them and try to get them in there in the most meaningful place. And they're probably going to ask you about your journey. They're probably going to ask you how you got started. Like try to like practice it, record it, listen to it, say that same story in the mirror, act like you're doing a keynote or a speech so that when it comes out really well. And over time you'll get better. If in the beginning it's a little choppy, it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Because there's that saying of practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
So we keep practicing.
I'm practicing every day.
Absolutely. We've got to. Actually, many years ago, one of my coworkers at a TV station I was working at, she said, Michael, you have a really good read. And I was like, oh, well, thanks for the compliment. But I read out loud every single day.
Wow.
So that I get a good read. And she was like, oh, huh. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah,
I'm going to take that with me, Michael, because I haven't been doing that. And I do in my on stage when I do some of the cards and some of the stuff in the beginning and the intros. Now that you just said that, I'm missing that. My read is not good. It's choppy, and it's because I don't practice it ever. I've never heard anybody else say they read out loud every day. I'm going to take that with me. Thank you, Michael.
Good. Yeah. One of the many blessings to you, Adam Torres.
I appreciate it.
We're talking about stories, and that made me think of Donald Miller's book, Story Brand. I don't know if you've read that one, but ladies and gentlemen, Adam is on hitting the target right in the bullseye because our stories are what matter. And so this is fitting with that because can you share a story of how Mission Matters maybe has directly impacted somebody's life or career trajectory, I should say?
Yeah. So when we first started this company, it wasn't called Mission Matters. It was actually called Money Matters, Money Matters Top Tips. And the reason why it was called that is because I was in finance. So it was a very obvious name. We thought that this was going to be like a financial advisory kind of platform. The first book was actually called Money Matters. And one day I'm on this podcast and I'm giving an interview in this case. And the gentleman says, Adam, and he says it kind of just like happenstance, like regular. It was like, so Adam, money matters, but mission matters too. And man, I swear it was like a bolt. Like God, I told you how God works with me. He puts me in the headlock. He, gives me a noogie, whatever. Like that's what he does. It was like a bolt, like a shock to my system. And I was just like paused, dead air for a moment or two. And I didn't even know what was happening. So I then after that interview, I called the other co-founder and I tell Chirag, and I'm like, hey, like Chirag, what do you think about the name Mission Matters? And he's like, yeah, we're talking about other things. It goes away. And then maybe like a month later, he calls me and he's like, hey, Adam, what do you think about the name Mission Matters? And I'm like, Chirag, that's a great idea. That's a great name for the company. Oh, the best way to do it is if it's somebody else's idea,
that's right?
So I'm like, man, that's a great name for the company. And so he tells me, I tell him, I'm like, Chirag, but you know what? If we do this, we need the domain. There's no way, no how. We need missionmatters.com. If we can't have that, we're not doing it. Like, it's not meant to be, but I already know 100% it's taken. So if we have enough money in the bank, period, and it doesn't put us negative, we're going to buy the domain, just period. What do you think? And I said, but I'm not going to look it up. I'm not going to get my hopes up. Like, if God wants this, it's good. So I look it up. It's a significant amount of money, more money than I'd ever thought I'd pay for a domain. It's the first time I ever worked at a broker or anything like that. And we were able to acquire it. And within 9 days from that point, we changed the entire brand. And now, just to be clear here, we already had books published under Money Matters. We had a website. I'd already done at least 1,500 interviews under that brand, Money Matters. And if anybody wants to call me out on that, Google Money Matters Top Tips, and you'll see it. The podcast is still up there. We don't add more episodes to it anymore, but you'll see all these episodes. So it's hard enough to get something to work the first time, but let alone to get it to stop and then like start on a, 9 days later, we had a new website. We had 8 new shows. We had all these other things going. And so now what happened is we created this platform that allowed so many other people to plug in and tell different types of stories.
Nice.
Because now I host over 8 shows. So I have a business show, a money show, entertainment show, a luxury show for more like lifestyle things. So it goes on and on, but we created this infrastructure for it. And what that's allowed us to do is, just to give you an example, I don't know if anybody watching or this saw that, if you like football, Michael.
Yes.
Bye Bye Barry.
Right.
So Barry Sanders, that movie that came out maybe a year ago. It was last Thanksgiving off the top of my head. Might have been the Thanksgiving before. You know how time flies and you lose a year. Might have been.
Yeah.
Number one streaming at that time documentary in Amazon's history for the and it was a complete amazing success. Well, we worked with Barry Sanders for about a year and a half on creating the book. So we published, as book publishers, the book that movie was based off of.
Wow.
So I didn't get paid for the movie, just to be clear. I was not in part of the movie, like, for clear communication. I was the book publisher.
Yes.
But I just to be clear, but that was based off the book, and to be able to work with like celebrities like that. And by the way, I'm from Michigan. I'm from Detroit originally. So I grew up watching Barry Sanders. I grew up watching him as a kid. I thought I still think, if you look at those highlight clips, he was a superhuman. Like, so as far as I'm concerned, he's the original X-Men. So to now get to publish the biography of one of your heroes that led to the movie that's one of Amazon's biggest successes and hits, insane. So that I have stories like that it's like, that's as big as it gets, like legend. There'll never be another Barry Sanders. And then,
that's for sure. That's for sure. And props to those Detroit Lions this year.
Yeah.
They did very well. I had a lot of cousins that were pretty psyched and stoked.
Yeah, they were
this year. So that Michigan connection runs deep.
Yeah.
I got to ask you then, people are listening, they're liking what Adam's saying, and they want to get in touch with you. How can they do that?
Easiest thing, Instagram, Ask Adam Torres, any social media really, but Instagram is the one that I respond to the most. So Ask Adam Torres on that Instagram or TikTok. There is a link there to my link tree, and on that link tree, you'll see so much free stuff. We give stuff out all the time. We got free books on how to launch podcasts, on how to become a bestseller. We got a newsletter with all of our best content that comes out weekly. That's all free. We have the newsletter. I'm convinced that we give out more free content and free production and resources and tools than maybe any other media outlet, because we're doing our part, let's say.
Yeah, and you've got a good community of people. I know you've got some events coming up in SoCal.
Oh yeah,
and don't want to date stamp the conversation we're having, but ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get more of Adam Torres, and it's worth your time to do that, absolutely head over to his different brands online. Adam, where do you see your company in the next 5 years?
Well, I can say at that point, I would have hit my goal of looking back after 10,000 interviews. So at that point, I'll probably be at, 12, 13,000 interviews. I can tell you right now, just when you think about blessings and putting out intention, I've been working on getting a Las Vegas residency, and I'm getting closer and closer. Like, the funny thing about when you start, you got this thing that's planted in your heart and you just kind of start letting it out. I find the more I say it, like, nobody's laughing. There's people trying to put this together. They find, if you think about when I say what do you need? You need money, you need sponsors, you need an audience, you need people behind it, you need infrastructure. The people that are coming together to make that happen along with my team, I'd like to see a really on point Vegas residency. The media side, it'll continue to drive that part of the brand. And I will be, at that point, approaching and or over, let's say, another, 13,000 interviews.
Nice. That's good. Goals, ladies and gentlemen.
Goals. Yeah.
Goals. I will say, so my wife and I have had 5ampodcast.com since the beginning of 2019. Our number one download still to this day. We should have monetized it, but it's our SMART goal worksheet.
Yes.
That thing gets downloaded all the time. Our own little creation. But ladies and gentlemen, goals are where it's at. And Adam, an absolute pleasure to have you on 5am podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Michael, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good. There you have it, folks. We only scratched the surface of Adam Torres's good insights and experiences. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, craft your story too. If you're hungry for more wisdom, I know I'm telling you this, you already heard it, on personal branding and podcasting and leveraging, the list goes on and on. Follow Adam on the Instas, if I can still say that, Instagram, the IG. We talked about OG Mandino, so we got the IG. It's at Ask Adam Torres. He's a cool dude, as you've heard. So there's treasures. You'll find a lot of tips, content, building your brand, writing your book. Don't wait. This is not a sales pitch, ladies and gentlemen, but one step in front of the other means that eventually the day comes that you step on where you realize you have to do it because you haven't done it. And if you want a different future than your past, you got to look at where your feet are planted and where they're going. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening, for joining. I often say this is like my friend here, my guest. We're sitting in a diner. You're listening in as you do. I mean, you're going to eavesdrop in a diner when you're booth to booth. Bring your friends over. Share this with them. We appreciate you joining in on the conversation. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to remind you, 5 stars on a review for 5 a.m. podcast. We would love that. And they tell us in marketing, if it's not a 5, it's a 0. So there's no middle ground in these 5-star ratings. So if you could find it in your heart for a 5-star review, that would be great. We'd love that. Now, we also have to thank the people that have gone over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. You've been generous with us, and we appreciate it. If you want to join the generosity crowd and help 5 a.m. podcast in our mission, it's 5ampodcast.com/5am podcast. Thank you, everyone. Seize your day and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets. I'm Michael Clausen.